In today's video, we're taking a look at our Tech Tuesdays Commander of the Week, and it is Marvin, Murderous Mimic. This colorless creature packs quite a punch with some really cool combos, so let's jump into the video. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. Be sure to hit the like button if you do enjoy this video, and then subscribe to the channel. Click the bell icon if you want to be notified when new videos are posted. Every Tuesday, we do post a new Commander deck profile, as well as other stuff throughout the week. And this one is coming up pretty late. By the time you guys are seeing this, it's probably going to be Tuesday evening. I had some unexpected things come up that I was unable to record earlier in the day, which I wanted to do. Alas, we're going to talk about Marvin today, and I think doing it last week, I was able to kind of get some timing things down. I know typically I have the tendency to start talking fast and not realize it. So I'm trying to go through this at a brisk pace, but also, know that as I do explain some of the reasoning for the cards, as you can probably watch the video, skip to different segments, some cards I'm not really going to go into detail as much just to make this a little bit shorter. But yeah, and if you guys are interested in the deck, I do have the whole deck list that I have posted in the description. It is not a super high budget version, but it's also not a low budget version. I tried to take into consideration the fact that, sometimes people may want to be somewhere in the middle. So value-wise, there's a lot of stuff in here that's super affordable. There's a few things that are definitely on the pricier end, and you can probably replace them with things pretty easily. So let's actually jump into this, starting off with, of course, our commander, Marvin, Murderous Mimic. He is a 2-drop legendary artifact creature toy, and he has all activated abilities of creatures you control that don't have its same name. Now, obviously, that's probably because if you get, Helm of the Host and make some extras, you'd have a lot of silliness going on there. But that being said, it's a really cool card, and it works uniquely as a colorless commander because there's so many activated abilities on colorless cards that are really strong, and when you can start to duplicate them and do things with them, that's where Marvin really shines. I will note he does have some pretty good interaction in other decks as well, just not one where he can be the commander, of course, because you're limited to colorless. Planeswalkers are pretty straightforward. We've got Karn, Living Legacy, just a pretty good card in general. It's a low budget card that can give you the ability to dig deeper into the deck, and you can also, kind of just generate the Power Stone tokens as ramp. In this deck, they can be used basically to cast pretty much everything, with a few exceptions, so just kind of a note there. Karn, the Great Creator, just a pretty great card overall, no pun intended. Just shuts off the activated abilities of your opponent's artifacts, as well as allows you the ability to turn your non-creature artifacts into creatures. Pretty much affordable now, too. It's been reprinted a couple of times, so it's a good card and definitely one worth including. Probably won't make you, the most popular person at the table, but alas, still pretty good. And then Ugin, the Ineffable. This is just a really good planeswalker. It costs, all your colorless spells cost 2 less to cast. He can also get face down things out and destroy some permanents, so having access to some utility pieces there are always going to be good. Now into the creatures. Of True Archaic, he just copies stuff from colorless sources, so pretty good and easy enough to use, and if you're already copying an effect with Marvin, you can then do it a third time. Pretty strong. Crypto Thrall, one of the newer cards from 40k. It just gives your other artifact creatures hexproof. Crystalline Crawler is a decent card. It's a 4-drop, and it has, when it enters battlefield, with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. So obviously in this case, you're only going to have one. You move a counter from it, add a mana of any color. You can tap it to put a counter. Basically, you can use this with Marvin to kind of ramp faster. Also, if you can untap consistently with some of the other cards we'll talk about briefly, then you can kind of do some infinite loops, or at least, endless loops, whatever. Drollworks Mole is a 1-drop. Pay 2 tap, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and a commander you control. Obviously, you use that with Marvin, and then Marvin can use that same effect, so that's sort of a fun interaction there. Really strong card, Farmstead Gleaner is a 3-drop. It doesn't untap during your untap step. However, you can pay 2 and untap it to trigger an effect. And what's interesting about this is that there is another card in the deck that we'll get to in just a minute that gives you an actual infinite mana combo. So you can then also use that infinite mana to just load +1/+1 counters onto some of your win conditions. So he's really good for that. The not untapping part doesn't even really matter all that much. It's just giving something else the ability to untap. Foundry Inspector is a 3-drop. Artifact spells cost 1 less, just pretty good. Giggling Skitter Spike is one of the newer cards from Duskmourn. It's pretty good, though. It's indestructible, and whenever it attacks, blocks, or becomes the target of a spell, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. You can also use Monstrosity with it to give it some counters, and you can, ideally start dealing a lot of damage with that card there. Gingerbrute's pretty good. It does have activated abilities, and one of those, of course, is making it so it can't be blocked except by creatures with haste. So you can use that in conjunction with the commander for some pretty good interactions. Glaring Fleshraker, just solid, creates Eldrazi tokens whenever you play colorless spells, which is your whole deck, and if another colorless creature enters, it deals a damage to your opponent. Just a really good card across the board. Hedron Crawler is a 2-drop mana dork in this deck. Joyous Familiar is a 4-drop that reduces the cost of your historic, so artifacts, legendaries, sagas. A ton of artifacts in here as well as a few sagas and legendaries, so just pretty good overall. Although the Forge Master, 5-drop, sack 3 artifacts, search your library for an artifact, put it onto the battlefield. Very good, and of course Marvin can copy this too if you're getting some big artifact generation going, but this can get you to key pieces. Liberator allows you to activate them from your hand, so that's, as though they had flash, so that's really good. And then when you do cast spells, it can get counters, but I mean, just in essence, in decks that are very colorless heavy, this card offers a lot just in regards of giving everything flash and having flash itself. Mindless Automaton, just another card that works well with Marvin. Same with Monoscalion. There's a good bit of cards in here that's just like pay one, do something. You can kind of copy those abilities, and especially if you're getting a lot of the mana, you can do that. Is it Mir? I don't know. I feel like people get pissed no matter how I pronounce it, but Welder, whatever. You can tap to exile target artifact card from a graveyard, and then it has activated abilities of cards exiled with it, so another way to maybe duplicate some stuff if for whatever reason Marvin isn't able to do it, or if the cards get exiled, just nice to have another option. Ornithopter Paradise, just another solid mana dork. Now, if you guys saw my video in the past, these two cards are sort of where our infinite combo comes into play for the most part. We've got Palladium Mirror. He is a 3-drop, tap, add 2 mana, and then we have Pili Pala. It's a 2-drop, it has flying, and then you pay 2 and untap it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So the way this combo works with Palladium Mirror and Pili Pala is if you have your commander on the board, you can tap it to add 2 colorless mana. You can then pay 2 colorless to untap, and then, basically kind of do the same thing. And because it still has the ability of Palladium Mirror, you can then tap it again and then untap it. And so you can keep doing that and generating the additional mana there, where you wouldn't be able to do that just with those 2 cards on the field, because once you tap the Palladium Mirror, there's no at least guaranteed way to untap it. So it's an infinite mana combo that is just one of a few this deck has. Roaming Throne is pretty good. I would say if you're looking to be more budget conscious, probably one you could cut. It's good to duplicate some of your abilities, and it's just solid in and of itself, but it's not a card that's mandatory, in my opinion, by any measure. Scrap Trawler is just good for recursion. Shimmermer is just good to give more stuff flash. Solemn Simulacrum, I mean, these are all pretty self-explanatory cards. Soul of New Phyrexia is a pretty good card, too. You exile it from your grave by paying 5, and then permanents you control get indestructible till end of turn. Pretty good, and while it's on the board, it can also give your permanents indestructible, so it's sort of a double use card, but having access to that to save you can be really good, especially when you're only playing colorless cards here. Steel Overseer, just good for buffing stuff. Triskellion's another one that it's basically like a weaker version of Walking Ballista, but it does have interactions with Marvin. I really like Ulamog's Dreadsire on the off chance that maybe you can't get things going as well. You can use this combo with another combo that does the untap to create an infinite number of tokens, which is really strong. And of course, sack a permanent mana value 1 or greater is its ward cost. So you can't get rid of tokens. You're basically able to make multiple tokens. Even if you don't have the combo, you can still use this in Marvin to make 2 10/10 Eldrazi's in the same turn. And then, like I said, if you do have the combo where you're having the untap and retap using cards like Pili Pala and Palladium Mirror, then you could just make a bunch, and that's your win condition. Voltaic Construct, just a decent card. It's not amazing, but it's not bad. Walking Atlas, pretty good. Tap, put a land, and then Walking Ballista is essentially your win condition. After you make that infinite mana, then you just spend it to put however many plus counters on it you need to just remove them all and burn the opponent for game. It is your most consistent win condition. It is extremely easy to get to in this deck just because of how easy it is to get to the artifacts. But of course, be aware that once you've played with this deck and won with this combo a few times, opponents are going to be on the lookout for it and probably trying to kill those combo pieces in some form or fashion before you really have a chance to go off, because Walking Ballista essentially ends the game when it hits the board, unless it's countered, because it is the effects can just continue to go on the stack. So if you have infinite mana, he's just going to be able to burn everything for game. So he's one win condition, but if for some reason your Ballista gets exiled or removed, you do have some other cards that can give you good pressure. All is Dust, Introduction to Annihilation and Selective Obliteration, 2 board wipes, and just a decent outage card. All His Dust is obviously great. Selective Obliteration, less good, but still useful here. Choose a color, exile each permanent unless it's colorless or it's only that color. So in monocolor decks, it can be really strong, and your cards are never going to get hit, so you don't really have to worry. Instant Eldritch Immunity and Null Elemental Blast, just both really good 1 cost. And then this is essentially, gives blanket protection as well if you do its overload cost. Warping Whale is just good for removal and flexible. And then Titan's Presence, easy enough to be an early game kind of removal. And you do play a few more powerful creatures that have higher mana costs, so at least if they're in your hand, there is a way that you can make use of them. And then artifacts, pretty quick I'm going to go through these because a lot of them are pretty self-explanatory, but I will spotlight a few. Basalt Monolith, tap to add 3, pay 3 to untap it. If you're unfamiliar, this is another infinite mana combo in this deck with Forsaken Monument. Every time you tap Basalt Monolith, it's going to add 4 instead of 3, then you pay the 3 to untap, and you do it again, and you continue to accrue that additional mana. So it's another infinite mana combo that is completely separate from the other one that we went over, but obviously plays into what this deck can really do. Cloud Key just reduces the cost. Commander's Plate's a really good card, but again, really expensive. You could substitute it with something cheaper, but if you have it on Marvin and he gets that blanket protection and a buff, it's certainly not bad. Commander Sphere is just I kind of threw this in at the last minute. I couldn't figure out a 99th card, but it is decent for draw power. I mean, you don't really need the mana. I mean, the mana is solid, but the draw power is decent and triggering other artifact effects. You could replace it, though. Darksteel Monolith is really good, just as indestructible and give you the ability to pay 0 for stuff that, is probably going to be costly, at least for some of the artifacts. Expedition Map is good for searching. Forsaken Monument, just like I said, in general, pretty good. We got the Greaves and the Swiftfoot Boots. Those are just standards. Manifold Key to untap stuff, and then Mind Stone, just another way to get waste, a decent mana rock. Mycosynth Lattice, a really good card that has a really funny interaction with Karn. But it might make you an enemy at the table, so just food for thought. But yeah, all permanents are artifacts in addition to their types. Cards that aren't on the battlefield, spells, and permanents are colors. In other words, what this does is if you play this in conjunction with the Karn, it says activated abilities of artifacts your opponent control can't be activated. Technically, tapping a land for mana is considered an activated ability, and because your lands are turned into artifacts while this card is on the field, your opponent can't tap lands for mana, which is really funny, but also kind of messed up. So, how to make of it what you will. Mystic Forge, just pretty good for artifacts. Rings of Brighthearth, another way to duplicate abilities. Sculpting Steel, another way to bring something out you might want to duplicate, or bring out a creature that can reduce costs, and then you're playing your stuff a lot cheaper. Soul Ring, pretty straightforward. The One Ring, it's another card that is pretty expensive, but in a deck like this, if you have access to it, definitely play it, because it is a really, really good card to give you some draw power and blanket protection if you can't get to your combos right away, and those are all pretty important elements here. So yes, I know it's expensive, and I hope they reprint it, because you shouldn't have to pay much for a card, but if you have one, I definitely think it's a very important card to include in here. And then 1,000-Year Elixir, another really good card. It's a little pricier, but it's really good, and it can let you use your creatures the turn they come out, which is going to put you so far ahead if you can get the right pieces. Thran, Dynamo, Voltaic Key, just again, decent options to untap stuff. And then Echoes of Eternity is my one enchantment. It's an optional card, but I like it, and it does copy all your colorless spells, as well as triggered abilities, so it's just good, I guess, is the best way to say that. And then on to lands, we'll go, again, really fast. Ancient Tomb is it's obviously, you can cut this for a waste or any other utility land, but if you have it, it's definitely worth playing. Blasted Landscape and Buried Ruin, both options. One's got cycling, one brings your artifacts back. Command Beacon, got Conduit Pylons, Crystal Grotto, and Hidden Grotto, all pretty much do the same thing or something very similar, and they can tap for waste, but at least it's better than just a waste doing nothing. You're still getting some value out of it, and it's not a land that comes in tapped. Emergent Zone, decent as an option to give you that flash ability if you need it. Encroaching Waste is just a decent, pay 1 and then you can sack it, destroy a non-basic land. Just another somewhat okay utility card. It's not great, but it's just an option, and it's pretty inexpensive. Fomori Vault, another good card to get some extra artifacts from the deck each turn, and still have the waste. Fountain Port, same thing. And then Inventor's Fair is decent enough. It lets you search your artifacts, which can get you to your combo pieces, which can win you the game. And a Cemetery, Reliquary Tower, Rogue's Passage. These are all pretty self-explanatory stuff, guys. Shrine of the Forsaken Gods, good for ramp. Tomb of the Spirit Dragon, good for life gain, especially later. The whole Urza series of lands here, Urza Saga is really good if you have access to it as well, because it fetches almost everything in the deck. Not everything, but more than half the deck, I guess. And then the land cycle for Urzas are great with the new, Urza's Cave as well as an additional way to fetch those out. And you've got Urza's Workshop, just such a good card. War Room, some waste, and then Zalfrin Void. You could play around with the land base a lot, but I think it's a pretty good overall, construction there. And I'm looking at this now as I'm just reviewing. Like I did this earlier. I think I might have accidentally included 2 copies of Mystic Forge, so it was giving me an invalid number, which should fix that. But that would leave us with, you know, any other spot. So with 36, I'd say we could just throw another Waste in there, I guess, you know, for the purpose of the video at least. But whatever you guys think, you could slot another artifact in there if there's another one worth playing. So the deck's extremely fun. Once it gets going, it just can pop off. There are some infinite combos here, so you know, keep that in mind depending on your play group if they're going to be okay with that type of thing, because the deck can absolutely pop off if you get the right pieces. Otherwise, it's also really fun and just a nice colorless deck that you know, has a lot going for it. So let me know what you guys think of the video. If you talk about other commanders you want to see videos for in future episodes, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.